Welcome back to Switched to Linux. Well, the brand new version of Debian just dropped. This is Debian Bookworm, and this is, some people have called it the Ubuntu killer. As Ubuntu moves more and more of its core packages into snaps, which are highly controversial and a lot of people don't want to mess with them, it raises a lot of people going, what else do I do? And we're seeing a few distributions abandon the Ubuntu core and move back to Debian. The big problem Debian has classically had is it rolls much slower, and that means newer hardware has a harder time getting support. Now, Debian has solved this problem with the latest edition, and that is a separation of the free software packages from the free firmware packages. So all of the firmware that's related to the hardware that you have on your system, all of those are now isolated into its own repository, meaning that we can enable non-free firmware to get your graphics cards and your wireless chips and all this type of stuff working fine, but you still will not have the option to do free software without explicitly setting that somewhere else. And so with a lot of this direction, more people are looking at Debian and going, maybe this is a better option, especially with the second point, and this is the proliferation of Flatpaks, snaps, and app images. You can still get between those almost all of the software that you would need in the absolute latest versions, if that is what you want, by enabling support for one of these methodologies in your distribution. So what we're going to do here is we're going to start a little series of videos. So I want you guys to tell me in the comments of this video, what other things do you want to see? Today, we're just going to be installing Debian Bookworm, and then in future videos, we're going to talk about adding a different desktop environment, because admittedly, the options we have on installing the desktop environments are limited. I kind of wanted to do Budgie, but it is not an auto install option, so we're going to have to do that manually. We're also going to talk about adding Flatpak support. We will talk about snap support, even though it's not my favorite thing. Some of you may want it, so we're going to go ahead and talk about snap support. And then we will do a video talking about how to get your main user into the sudo group, which is very easy, but it's something most distros do for you. So it may be something that is unfamiliar to you as you move into Debian. So what we're going to do is, this video is just how to install it. We're going to download and install the net installer, and then we're going to have a very brief look at the system, how the software repositories are set up, and then we'll leave this video at that point. And then the next video in the series, we're going to pick up adding a new desktop environment, and then from there, let me know in the comments the types of things you want, because I have received a few emails and comments and videos saying, hey, can you do a tutorial on getting Debian really set up, because there's a few different settings in it. And I hear that, I love that idea, and I was waiting for Bookworm to actually come out before we started actually approaching that. So I'm going to be working on those over the course of the next few weeks, getting some good videos up and getting us a good at least one video a week on the Debian series until we have all of your questions answered, at least as far as I'm able to do them. So with that, let me know those comments, and let's move on to the Debian install. So here we have our virtual machine set up. We're going to use VirtualBox for this, and we have our video memory set at 256. We have 4 processing cores, 4 gigs of RAM. Let's go ahead and get this guy set up. So over here we have a install, we have a graphical install, we have advanced options. So we have graphical expert install, rescue mode, automated install, expert install, rescue mode, automated install. And then we have our accessibility, we have help, we have install with speech synthesis. So let's just go ahead and do your basic graphic install. I think that's going to be working best for most people. All right, so we're going to start by choosing our language. Now, this is the net installer, and so with our net installer, we are going to get this guy set up where we can choose all of the various components as we go, rather than downloading a bigger one. So this net installer, it's a smaller download, but there's no way to test Debian live. That's why everything in there was just install. So don't grab this one if you just want to test it. You're going to find the live key for in the event you want to test it out. This is explicitly to install. And I find it to be the better option because it gets you the best, all of the latest updates and more configuration on the front end here, so we have less to do later. So here's our root password, my super secret password. That's definitely not 123. Full name for the user. We're going to call this guy Debian. And choose our password. Now, one of the things that Debian does is it does not add the basic user to the sudo group. That's one of the things people have asked about. How can you make all this stuff work? How can you get your Debian stuff set up? We're going to cover all that in a future video. So I'm going to be looking for your input. What types of things do you guys want to see setting up a Debian system for full use? So now we need to configure our clock. So guided uses the largest continuous free space. We can use the entire disk. We're going to use the entire disk. If we use this one here, it might set it up, and because this was a previous distribution, it might skip some of the disk. We're just going to use guided, use the entire disk. Or we can use let's do the entire disk with LVM. I like that better. We also have the option to encrypt Debian now. So if you want to run an encrypted system, if you're doing this particularly on a laptop or you're dealing with more sensitive stuff, definitely do the encrypted. In the case of doing the VM, I'm just going to do it with this step without the disk encryption. The difference is you're going to get one more screen, which is going to ask you for a full disk encryption. So here is the only disk in here, which is the disk assigned to the virtual box. And then we can put all our partitions in one, all our files in one partition. We can use a separate home partition. You use separate home, var, and temp partition. So you do these latter two if you happen to, if you're doing like an install like you might find on something like a Windows where you'll have your operating system on one drive and all of your data on another. That's where you might do that, which you'd select a different disk and partition for your home data. This is a simple basic install for fairly new users, so we're just going to put all of our files into one partition. So once we get through here, it's going to start saying, all right, we're going to start moving stuff around. You have to toggle this to yes, which is going to start the process of writing files to your disk. This means everything on this disk is now gone. So don't do this if there is anything remaining on the disk that you still need to get. We're going to go ahead and push our continue. You can see it's partitioning our disks. And then do you want to write the changes? So now it has it all partitioned. You need to do, this is your second step. You need to hit yes, and it's partitioning disks, and now all of your data is gone because we are getting ready for the brand new operating system. And now that we are installing the base system, we're going to go ahead and pause the recording until we come back. All right, so the base system is installed. So your base system is basically the underlying Linux and some of the core things getting the system to work. Do we want to scan extra media? No, we do not. If you were downloading the entirety of the Debian system, which takes several DVDs or something, you might have to hit yes here, put in the next disk. If you remember the old Windows installs on floppy disks where you had to, all right, pull it out, insert disk 3, you know. So we're hitting no on this case. So now we're going to configure our package manager. This is going to determine our mirrors. So let's go ahead and check out United States. Debian's going to work best for me. There is no user proxy we have to fight through. And so now we're doing that. All right, so next is the popularity contest. This is one of those ones that will install. If we hit yes here, it's going to install the popularity contest application, which pings some basic analytics. You'll see it is disabled by default. Being a privacy-based channel, I am not interested in participating. Sorry, Debian. And now it comes to installing our desktop environments. So which desktop environment do we want to choose from? So our basics, we have LXQT, LXDE, Mate, Cinnamon, KDE Plasma, GNOME Flashback, XFCE, and GNOME. I wish we had like Budgie here. What do I want to do? Do I want to do GNOME or do I want to do something else? I'm kind of sick of Plasma, and most of the distros I've been using lately have been Plasma. I like it. I'm just kind of sick of it. I haven't done LXDE or LXQT in a while. Oh man, I don't even know anymore. XFCE is always a good one. Let's go with, I don't know, let's just go with the basic GNOME. Let's just go ahead and keep it GNOME. Not my preferred desktop, but Oh well, maybe we can install Budgie later. That might be a fun thing we do. All right, the other options we have, we do a web server. If you install this, it's going to give you at least Apache, probably PHP as well. SSH server, in the event you need to SSH into this computer for a remote access, you can enable that. If you do not need to do such a thing, keep that disabled. That's an extra security. And then standard system utilities. I don't know exactly what is in here, but it's going to be things like printing for cups, maybe some scanning. It's probably going to be Samba file servers, network folders, stuff like that. I do use that type of stuff, so I'm going to go ahead and configure it with those set up. And now we're going to be waiting again while we download and install all the software for our desktop environment. So now it's asking us about installing GRUB. It seems this is a new installation. Is the only operating system? If so, it should be safe to install it on your primary drive. So if you had other operating systems, then you need to do something different with GRUB. But in this case here, it's automatically detects, do you want to install it to your primary drive? Yes, that is the correct answer for right here. And then you'll need to make the newly installed system bootable by installing GRUB on bootloader on a bootable device. So we'll just select this one here. This is what it means. We're going to choosing the target, where is our primary drive, and then it is going to go ahead and run the install, and then it's running the update grub command, which is actually searching for operating systems and creating your UEFI settings in your operating system. Okay, now we are done with the installation. Installation is complete. It is now time to boot into your new system. Make sure you remove the installation media so you will boot into the new system rather than restarting the installation. Choose continue to reboot. Now, at one point in time, Debian did not boot out the install. It looks like it has done so this time. Here's our advanced options. You'll see it's just giving us the recovery mode or our basic one. You can see we are running Linux kernel 6.1.0 through 9, so we don't need to run our uname system. That's reported right there. So now we have gear option, we have GNOME, we have GNOME Classic, GNOME on X. So that's telling me that we are running this on Wayland. Now we're going to run through our welcome screens. So just making sure we have everything set up right. We're going to turn our location services off. If we want to connect our Google, Microsoft, or Nextcloud, then you can do that. And now we'll start using it. Now I'm going to go ahead and do a screen fix, which is something you will not have to do on real hardware, but I do need to do it here on a virtual machine. So here we are landing on the GNOME desktop. And first thing, let's go ahead and double check our version of GNOME here. So we're going to go into our terminal. We're going to do a GNOME shell and version. So we're running GNOME version 43.4. I think there might be a newer version out by now, but I'm not 100% certain at this time of release. This might actually be the absolute latest. So here's your default applications on Debian with GNOME installed. So we have contacts, we have weather. Is this a new game? Okay, we have some type of game. I'm not familiar with that particular one. We have maps, we have solitaire, videos, chess, a couple extra games and whatnot, things I don't generally use, but we have that. We do have disk analysis. We do have tweaks installed. So here we can do suspend when laptop lid is closed. Of course, this is not a laptop. Over amplification, allow the raising the volume above 100%, sure. And under our appearance, we have, so right now we don't have a lot of extra options for icons and whatnot. Of course, we can add those in. If we want to add such extra themes, we can go ahead and do that. Here's our basic fonts. Keyboard, mouse, and then startup applications, our top bar. So our clock, do we want the weekday listed? Date, we can do seconds as well. And calendar, we can do week numbers as well. Let's go ahead and do that. Show you what that looks like. All right, window title bars. We can toggle the maximize. Let's see. Toggle maximize. Do toggle maximize. Middle click, minimize, secondary click. Let's just keep that on menu. And then maximize and minimize buttons. Yes, please. And then we can move them to the left or to the right if we would like. Window options. All right, so there's what we have inside of our tweaks. Now, the thing that makes this particular version of Debian so much better, and why I call it the Ubuntu killer, is this version of Debian, it carries with it a slight separation in how they have done the free versus non-free software, and that if there is non-free firmware, there is a separate package to install firmware, so your system will work even with proprietary devices, but you still do not automatically have our non-free software installed. So that is one of those things that we have to keep in mind. So you can see here, this is non-free firmware is enabled. The reason this got enabled in my case is because we are running this in a virtual machine. So you can see I'm running this full screen. You used to have to install the VirtualBox guest editions in order to get a full screen in Debian. All right, so now it is detected we are in a virtual machine, so it enabled the non-free firmware, installed that because I installed it on a system with that. We can also turn on the non-free software if we want. We can toggle that on right here in this nice GUI interface, rather than having to rely on doing that in the terminal, like is what you used to have to do. If you want to change your mirrors, you can go ahead and change your mirrors from here as well. So this is a nice feature as well. I don't know how long this has been here. I don't remember seeing it before. I do remember going through and having to make all of these changes to the software repository manually inside of the terminal. So now in this new version, and this is, I believe, something tied to the GNOME software store, we have the ability to simply add and make these changes. So if I want to do the non-free, we can go ahead and do that. We have to enter an administrative password. So now I've enabled all of the non-free. Every bit of software that's available, whether it's under a free license or not, is enabled right there. We're not going to go ahead and do that right this second. There's other software authentication. So these are your keys, and then developer options. If you want to look at proposed updates, you can go ahead and do that, although it might cause any issues. We'll go ahead and close this, reload that. This is basically running a sudo apt update, so it will update your cache. And now here's what we have inside of our system. Let's go ahead and search for something. Let's look for like Kdenlive is always that application I always search for, because it kind of tells me what all is enabled here. So it looks like we have Deb enabled. It looks like whether or not we can support Flatpak, we probably don't have Flatpak support. So we'll go ahead and talk about how to do that in a separate video. Let's go ahead and look at our terminal. Let's look at Flatpak and do version. Flatpak command is not found. So that means that Flatpak is not even installed. Snap is not installed. So if you want to add any of the third-party software, you'll have to install either Snap or Flatpak and install it from there, and then you'll go ahead and be able to install software. Now, this is that's the second feature that makes this kind of the Ubuntu killer, is that not only do we have good firmware, so this means that our system itself is going to support more hardware. It's going to be more stable for longer, but also with the proliferation of either snaps or Flatpaks or app images, you can get the latest versions of software without waiting for Debian to update them, because we know Debian is slow as molasses when it comes to updating things. That's one of the advantages and one of the disadvantages. So this guy here, you'll see it's works well out of the box. Here's our Firefox version. We are still running Firefox ESR. And Firefox ESR is a more long-term release type. You can see it's based on Firefox 102, so it's a little bit older, but it has a lot more security. It covers the security without adding the new features, types of things I like to see. We have Evolution as our client. And you can see the extra software that we have installed. So out of the box, this should be a really well working system, and it's not going to break itself on updates a lot. And that is really the advantage that we have running Debian. And with this new change in how the software is relating to the firmware and the non-free software separately now, it means that you can be confidently running free software, with maybe the exception of the firmware required to get your system running. So you're not going to be fighting with wireless cards or other proprietary stuff or the latest graphics cards quite as much as you would in the past. This is really what's making Debian a much better option, and why I think more people are starting to move to Debian as Ubuntu starts crippling its core system over reliance on snap. Debian never does that, but you can still add snaps if you want the latest versions of the packages, or you can just keep using the versions of the packages that Debian has. So it really depends on what you are trying to do. In future videos, we're going to go ahead and do a lot of the setup stuff in this. I think we're going to change the desktop environment to like Budgie, something that I would like to do, but just did not get a chance to select from on the install. Sad. But we'll go ahead and do that. We'll also talk about how to add your main user to the pseudo groups, set up Flatpaks and or snaps. Anything else you guys would like me to do, leave those in the comments. We're going to run a Debian series at least once a week, get a full Debian system up and running for you guys so that you can be confident in having a system that's not going to change on you a whole lot, that is going to have some of the latest software and the latest features you have. So with that, thank you for watching, everybody, and I hope that you enjoy switching to Linux. Thank you for watching this video from Switched to Linux. This channel would not be possible without the backing of the program supporters scrolling on the screen now. You can be a supporter at Patreon at patreon.com/TOMM or at thinklifemedia.com. I also want to thank the open source community who creates such excellent software that makes producing this show possible. Please remember to support your software communities. Thank you, and I hope that you enjoy switching to Linux.